Good evening. It is now 6 p.m., and I would like to welcome all of you to the second session of our parish-wide town hall meeting. I'm going to ask that you please silence your cell phones. It is a must that we identify and recognize the different chiefs, along with the DA's office, the sheriff department, and Sam Jones will be here later because legislation. Sam is here, so we're going to bring Sam on up. But we want to just raise your hand. Mark Griffin will be representing Morgan City PD. Harry Smith with Baldwin. Beverly Morris with Franklin. Morris Beverly. I'm reading what I have here. Morris Beverly with Franklin. We have David Leonard with Berwick. We have Garrett Grogan with Patterson PD. We have Gary Driscoll with the Sheriff's Office. We have Cataline Terrio with 16th Judicial. Okay. Ms. Angelique Narcisse, 16th Judicial. And we have our DA, Mr. Beaudouet. So that lets you know we're really taking this serious, and we're trying to put the whole puzzle together. And law enforcement plays a vital role. And I do want to recognize that we do have our coroner. We have Dr. Balonson, who's with us, and so forth. He gets to see a lot dealing with gunshot, with violence, and along with the fentanyl, with the drugs and deaths and so forth. So, without any further ado, we're going to ask that you just sit back, pay close attention, so we won't be redundant and repetitive when we get down to the question-answer session. So I'm going to bring up Ms. Pearl Rack, and she's going to be the moderator for this evening. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second town hall meeting for St. Mary Parish. I'm honored to be your moderator for today. We are here to find out what are they doing, but then you have to think about it. What can we do? We have to look in the mirror first, okay? And as the questions have come in, my buzzword for today is respect. So I am going to respectfully ask the questions. I'm going to ask the panel to respectfully answer the questions. And I'm going to ask you in the audience to respectfully receive the answers. Now, you're not going to like all of them, all right? Some you'll like, some you will not like, all right? Some you might have issues with. If you have issues with anything, we're going to ask that you take those issues to the department. We're not going to hold those issues to the floor at this time. So we're going to ask questions, and then sometime during this program, if you have questions for the mic, then we will let you address those questions. Is that fair? All right, we're ready to begin. Okay. From what I heard last week is that we want to come together. There are things that are going on, and we're trying to find out what can we do together to make this thing work. All right? So we're going to start with our first question. And the first question says, how would you rate these crimes in your community on a scale of 1 to 10? Home invasion, gun violence, drug epidemic, and domestic abuse. Okay? Well, so you have the mic, Chief Beverly.
I do have the mic. Yes. Yeah, I do have the mic. And when it comes to answering those questions, first, home invasion, that's really not a big issue in the city of Franklin. For home invasion, I have that as a 0. That's really not a big issue. One of the biggest issues that we have is gun violence in the city of Franklin. And that is a tremendous problem. When anybody, anyone, one person loses their life to senseless gun violence, that is an issue. We really, the Franklin Police Department, take this seriously. And we've been working with different agencies, the sheriff's office, and all the agencies actually that are up here tonight. We work hand in hand. We've met together to form a task force pretty much to handle this issue. Once again, like I said, from a 1 to 10, I consider gun violence a 10. It's nothing other. It's nothing other than a 10, and it can't be anything other than a 10. And like I said before, it's because of the fact that it's senseless for anyone to lose their life over a gun. The third, drug epidemic, that really is issue throughout the parish, it's throughout the city, it's throughout the country. And I can only say that that would be another 10. Even though I'm giving that a number of 10 on a scale of 1 to 10, it's really hard to actually judge that number, because when an officer comes into contact with someone that have drugs, they're immediately arrested. And so the only thing you can do is you can judge based on the amount of arrests that we make for drugs. And we do that constantly. We constantly arrest people for different types of drugs, fentanyl, cocaine. Cocaine is one of the minute ones compared to some of the other ones. Marijuana is a drug that we arrest people a lot. Even though there have been some changes in the drug laws as it comes to marijuana, it really is an epidemic also. And last item is domestic abuse. Once again, when it comes to domestic abuse, that's one of those items that you run across those people, and then the only way you know how bad that problem is when you encounter them and you make those arrests. We don't have that big of a problem with domestic abuse, even though the pandemic kind of increased it a little bit because of the fact that people were confined to their homes more than ever before. And of course, since they're confined to a smaller base for a longer period of time, problem arose. So even though that's not a big issue as the gun violence is and the drug epidemic, it is a problem. And that's something that we've addressed and we will continue to address.
Okay, thank you. And pass the mic.
I agree with Chief Beverly. What we've seen, home invasions is slim to none. I can't remember the last couple of years since we had a home invasion. Now, with gun violence, without a doubt, is a 10. We've seen way too many of it. Way too many of our youngsters, our 16, 17, 18-year-old kids out there using guns. When I was growing up, we used fists. They're using guns now. It's a tragedy. to see these young kids lose their lives, you know, on simple arguments. It's something that needs to be addressed. We have addressed it at the sheriff's office. We did make a team a few months ago to hit the streets hard in every area where the guns are out there, a lot of the violent crimes. And the last few months, we have picked up 65 weapons off the street. Last year, our teams only picked up 25. So it is definitely a problem that needs to be addressed. Like Chief said, we all working together, trying to put a team together and support each other. It is something that we need to take charge of and do a better job of. The drugs, it's always a problem in the St. Mary Parish. Parish-wide, we've always had this issue, probably always will. We'll just keep continuing to fight. The marijuana, the methamphetamine, and heroin is huge right now. As far as the domestics go, a few years ago when COVID hit, it was definitely worse. Numbers shot up probably 60–70% across the nation. And here in St. Mary Parish, we've seen the same thing. The numbers I got, we had in 2020, we had 127 calls. So far this year, only 21. So I think being cooped up together, it caused some issues. And now that COVID has lifted, it has gotten better, and we're seeing less and less.
Good afternoon. As far as the home invasions, none. But the gun violence and the drugs is definitely picked up a good bit in the city of Patterson. We got an average of the 10, and the drugs is the 10, and I think they go hand in hand because most of the people are, the violence is coming from the drugs that was being dealt with, and we're trying to eliminate that situation. So if we can get to the drug problem and take care of that, that may help with the gun violence that has been going on throughout the parish. Domestic has picked up. I'll give that a 10 also.
Yeah, okay. Okay,
Sure. All right. On our aspect dealing in Morgan City, we've had a couple instances of what was reported as home invasions, which the detectives went ahead and wrapped that up pretty quickly. So that on that, I would give that probably about a 3 or a 4. With the gun violence and the drug epidemics probably going to go hand in hand. To reiterate what Mr. Driscoll was saying, we recovered 61 guns off of the street as of a year ago. We're probably on track to probably do the same thing again, and if we don't get a handle on this, it's going to be terrible. But we do what we can. The officers stay on top of what they can at the time, and we definitely need help from the public itself. The public needs to get more involved to help us out.
First of all, thank everyone for coming. It's greatly appreciated. We as chiefs of police want to hear the public's input. Without y'all, we do not know what's going on to a certain extent. So we need people. We need our eyes and ears out there on the street. In Berwick, just like every other community, we're slightly different. We have different issues. In Berwick right now, the juvenile problem is off the charts. And I think it runs hand in hand with the gun violence and the drugs. So all three of those, I think, would be your top 10 in Berwick. False home invasions, we have had a few of them, and they were solved. But it was all with the public's help. The public in Berwick has been enormous for us. We've always had a great relationship with our community from one side of town to the other, and it has played an integral part in this constant fight that all of us chiefs and the representative for the Sheriff's Department, Gary, that we're trying to do. So we welcome input from anyone. We want to solve it. It has to start somewhere. Would you like me to address it from my perspective?
you can.
I think you're getting a uniform theme going in here is, it's a violent crime, but it's the drugs that are fueling it. I know for many years, and correct me if I'm not sure that we're still actually doing it as often as before, but every sheriff's department would screen people that were arrested on any charge with, back in the day it was marijuana, cocaine, amphetamines, and now it's methamphetamines and opioids. And we were running well over 70% of the people arrested on any charge that are high on something when they were arrested. Think about that. That tells you what is the driver, and whether it's a person who's an addict that's using it, and then you have addicts that use, that sell on a lower level to support their habit, but it goes all the way up to the ones that don't use, who are dealing them in mass quantities. And that's where your gun and your violence becomes. That's where your homicides happen. And it's all stemming between that product of drug use. So the issue is trying to deal with the drug problems that I think will solve or address, at least slow down some of the other aspects of what these chiefs are talking about. We realize in the DA's office that there's many people who are hooked on drugs that are good people that made poor choices and got hooked on them. I mean, I've seen them everywhere, from a person who owns a successful business go and get a shoulder surgery, get prescribed opioids, and then next you know he's lost his business and he's hooked on heroin. Well, those kind of people, you want to try to give them help. Throwing them away, locking them up is not what was constructive. If they don't want to get help and solve help, you may have to do that. But we started drug courts in 1996. You know what the first parish drug court in the state of Louisiana occurred? St. Mary Parish. So this parish needs to be proud of addressing and being forward thinking. And last year, we had 2,200 contacts in our drug court programs. I see we have Judge C.U. and Judge Hamilton here, and they know all about drug court. It's not a perfect solution, but in many cases, it can cure the addicts and cure the criminals. But it's a lot deeper than just that. It's deeper into the violence that surrounds the dealing with drugs that is critical. And I would agree with also that another problem is juvenile. And time that may be appropriate, I can give you the history of the juvenile problem, but it is a problem.
Okay. We would like the Chief Smith to be able to address the same topic.
Good evening to everyone. I'd like to thank the mayor for putting this on the program. I'd like to thank the mayors last week. It was a good topic. I'd like to thank the chiefs coming together for putting this on. The only way we're going to bring the communities together is what we're doing tonight. And all the mayors last week did a great job. If you all wasn't here, I'm the chief of police in Baldwin. My name is Harry Smith. The drug problems in Baldwin, we got to get a hand on it. It's an ongoing process. I've been in law enforcement for 30 years, and it has always been a problem. But with the experience, with all the chiefs and officers, and we all work together, and working with the mayors and the churches and the community, I think we can solve this problem. Home invasions in Baldwin, we don't have any home invasions. Thank God, we don't have any home invasions. At night, the officers out patrolling the streets, so that covered the home invasions in Baldwin. For the domestic abuse cases in Baldwin, the cases is low. We hardly ever get into domestic abuse cases in Baldwin. Right now, I'm trying to work on a program for the officers to where whenever we get domestic abuse cases, we can talk to the victims and get with the DAs and see what we can do to curb the problem. And that's all I have on this issue here.
Okay, thank you. We keep hearing about home invasion. Can just one person tell us the difference between home invasion and burglary?
Home invasion is whenever you have a particular group of individuals that arm themselves and they make forceful entry into a residence with it's either occupied or unoccupied. A burglary, on the other hand, the residence could be occupied or unoccupied, but they're going into the residence or to the business, looking to pillage, looking to take whatever that they can get to make that quick buck out on the street. The home invasion is much more dangerous. Again, Burroughs had cases of it, and they were all typically tied with drug activity. And they are the worst crime, the worst, because you have victims there that are held at gunpoint, knife point, or some type of instrument that threatens the family. And there's nothing worse than being violated in your own home. You're violated in your own home, you lose trust in a lot of things. And that's why we put every case that we work a priority. We want our citizens in Berwick to have trust, go to sleep at night, and wake up the next morning safe.
Okay, thank you very much. Last week we had some mayors who were on the hot seat. We're just going to ask the mayors who were on the hot seat last week and on the good seat this week, if you would just please stand. Thank you all for coming. All right. And as you heard, there are some judges in the audience. There's Judge Seague, Judge Hamilton, and Judge Oakland. Would you please stand and be recognized? Thank you very much. As I'm listening to your answers, a lot of things seem to deal with juveniles, okay? And so one question, and we see that Mr. Sam Jones is here, and we're going to ask Mr. Jones if you would come up and answer a question that we have as far as the legislature is concerned. The age went from 17 to 18 as the legal age to be charged with a crime. And so we would like to know, how did that happen?
I'll just do it here. Good evening, everyone. First, I want to thank you for 12 good years in the legislature representing this area. 2 times without opposition. I appreciate that very much. In 2019, there was a bill proposed by a House member named Mike Johnson from Middle to North Louisiana, following a Supreme Court judgment, I believe it was. It may be a state Supreme Court, or it may have been the federal one, but it required us to not charge a 17-year-old with a felony that puts them in prison, but that anybody that's 17 or 15 or 12 that commits a crime of violence can be arrested. But they need to be put in a special lockup that each parish has a responsibility to formulate or get in their parish or cooperate with the additional parishes. So the idea that a 17-year-old can't be arrested is false, or a 15-year-old can't be arrested. I didn't remember that bill in particular because it passed overwhelmingly to get in concert with the rest of the country. That's the answer to that one.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Well, Mayor. Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. Okay. Huh?
I'll sit here and wait.
Well, okay, he's going to sit here and wait. And if you have some questions for him, according to what he stated, then after we ask these questions, then your questions will come about. Okay? We've been talking about juveniles, and Mr. Jones answered the questions about the juvenile age. Let me ask Mr. Dewitt. Some feel like feel like why arrest a juvenile when you're only going to release them back to the parents and not have a consequence. But I did hear you say something, and would you speak on that too?
How about now? Okay. Yeah, would the juvenile, if y'all bear with me in the history of it, juveniles historically were up to the age of 16. When you're a 17-year-old, you were an adult, and you were treated as adult, held in an adult facility. Back in, Sam, you said 2019. They had a push to raise the age. All but I think 2 other states had the juvenile became an adult at age 18 and not 17. And so there was a push in the legislature to be consistent with the rest of the state. The big problem with juveniles is you got to distinguish between pre-adjudicated juvenile, which means that's before they go to a hearing and they're adjudicated whether they're a delinquent or not. Delinquent is analogous to being convicted or not convicted. While they're pre-adjudicated, the responsibility to house the juveniles is on the parish or the local municipality versus the state, because they're not considered a state issue until they're adjudicated delinquent. So the real problem is housing these pre-detention juveniles. And this dates back to early on in the Juvenile administration, where there was a lot of facilities around that housed juveniles, but the state introduced some standards. They're called juvenile detention standards that are part of the law, that it was kind of like modified of what they called, I know I'm getting technical, but bear with me, the Missouri model, where you were required, if a juvenile was being housed, they had to be housed in certain facilities on a certain number of juveniles per pod. They had to have health care, they had to have medical care, all of these things that drastically raised the cost to house the juvenile per day. And it got so expensive in the local jails that they just shut down their facilities for juveniles because they could no longer afford it, which created and shrunk the amount of facilities that we have statewide. And statewide, we have about 10 facilities still left, and the closest one being in Terrebonne. And what happened is, in the Juvenile administration, when they had to cut in the budget, they cut the Office of Juvenile Justice. We call it OJJ. They cut their budget down to, let's see, they were at $7 million in their budget, and they cut them down to $2 million. Okay, so there was no facilities left for them. In the law, when you arrest or you detain a juvenile, you got 72 hours to either put that juvenile in a facility or you have to release him, like releasing without a bond. That's what the law mandates. And that's the rules we have to follow, along with the judges. So, and that's even with a juvenile that stole candy from a candy shop or committed murder. So you're on this clock, and that clock ticks. And so what happens is all of these agencies, and this is across the state, we start scrambling for finding a place. And we used to have a place a lot of times. There's one in Lafayette, and there's a lot of one over in Terrebonne Parish that would take juveniles from other parishes. Restrict the numbers of beds because they had enough juveniles to house themselves in their parish, as well as these other facilities around the state, which are not many. Hurricane Ida hits, and they had to move all the juveniles out of Terrebonne and bring them up north. It filled that place up, but there was no spots. And now those local parishes are all keeping those beds to themselves to deal with their juvenile problems. And so what happens right now, if we got to hold a juvenile, it's not uncommon to have to ship that juvenile to Mississippi or Alabama to find the facilities where they can stay. And that could cost upwards to $200 to $300 to $400 per day. Per day. And now there's a federal law that says you have to review that situation every 30 days and you can only hold them for 180. So what we try to do is with juveniles, particularly those that commit violent crimes, there's a certain kind of crime, first-degree murder, second-degree murder, ag rape, or first-degree rape, where they're automatic, where you could transfer them to adult court, depending on their age. And if you do that, they could be held in an adult facility while they're still below 18, but it's no sight, no sound, which means they can't mix with the adult population, they can't interact in any way, shape, or form, which of course causes more restrictions on these facilities like we have in Centerville or any other parishes around here. So what has happened over the years is when we raised the age to 17, I happened to be on a commission in Baton Rouge, I said, wait. I'm not opposed to treating 17-year-olds like juveniles, but we do not have the infrastructure to house them when they commit violent crimes. Well, that fell on deaf ears, and they kept going forward with that legislation. What happens, as an example, in the year before this thing took effect, there was 33 homicides committed in the state of Louisiana by 22 juveniles. 33 homicides by 22 juveniles before this law went into effect. When that law went in effect in 2019, there were 99 homicides now in Louisiana committed by 70 juvenile offenders, because remember, we took the most violent age of 17 and made them juveniles. Out of those 70 juveniles, or the 99 homicides, 60% were 17-year-olds. 30% were 16-year-olds. 15-year-olds made up 10%. So you're talking between 17 and 60-year-olds, you got 90% of the homicides committed went from 33 to 90, 99 in almost a year. And that's where the system has fallen on the juveniles. And what happens is, but for, and gentlemen, y'all correct me, but for committing an extremely serious felony, we struggle to find a place to put them, right? And it's not and it's just the reality of it. And so what we need to do is impress upon everyone working together to impress upon the importance of this. In fact, there was a law in the legislature this year to reduce the age. Take it and make 17-year-olds back to being adults. Because I'll just be honest with you, and somebody stop me when I'm wrong. What happens is the adult criminal entices the juvenile to do the crime. Here, take this AR-15, go do that drug rip down the street that becomes a murder. Nothing's gonna happen to you. Don't worry about it. They're gonna release you back to your mom. Right? Right? And so they have no fingerprints on the crime, and the juvenile is listening, and he's getting paid with cash, cars, to do it. That's where your juvenile problem exists.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Jones, want to address that?
In our passage of that bill, there is nothing that prevents law enforcement from arresting that person if they've done a crime of violence. And if you see something, you need to say something. And you need to say something to someone you trust. Tell them what you saw, what happened. And that's the only way this is going to slow down and stop. We had a 15-year-old that shot someone a couple of years ago, killed them. I mean, I've never heard of that in my life, but it's going on. We're having shootings going on all over the country, but we're having them here too, in our neighborhoods. If you see something, you need to say something. You need to call the police and have them come. You know, former life, I was a police officer in the St. Mary Sheriff's Office for 7 years. We never encountered stuff like this. This was just didn't happen. I believe with all the money that's been put out into the economy in the last 5 years, there are more kids with more money than you've ever seen before, and the money becomes expendable, and they go buy a gun from somebody out of the back door, and they're out wanting to show off, and the next thing you know, they're shooting somebody. If you see something, say something. There's no protection for someone who commits a crime of violence, no matter what their age is.
Okay, thank you. Officers, at what point should the parents be responsible for their children's criminal behavior?
I think they need to be immediately responsible for their children's behavior. I think that's part of the problem with our society is we try to push the raising of their children on everyone else, on the school systems, on the police departments, on the social programs. It all starts at the foundation of correct your child at home. If they're going to do bad, they have to have consequences. They may not like them, but that's where it starts at. It starts at home. And to kind of back up a little bit, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Whenever we have gun violence and they're 13 years old, that was unheard of 35 years ago whenever I got into law enforcement. Now they have shootouts like they're in OK Corral. But all of those legislators and senators and everybody else in Baton Rouge, they don't have to face the families of these victims. We do. Us, chiefs of police, the police officers, we have to face those families and explain now that, sorry, the law's changed and we have to release this person. But I can tell you this, there is hope, and this is not a plug for Mr. Dewey. He's a great person, but we've had lengthy discussions with him, and he does have a plan. And I think it's going to be a viable plan for law enforcement to have an outlet to reach these juvenile problems. Go back to the original question, the parents have to be held accountable. No ifs, ands, or buts. They got too many grandparents, too many aunties, and too many other people raising their own children. You have to take the responsibility. You brought them into the world, you do the right thing. Be out there with them. Know what your kids are doing. Monitor their social media. They're way smarter nowadays than what they ever have been. If you have a problem with your computer, ask your 13-year-old. They'll fix it quicker than what you can. We have to hold our children accountable, period. No ifs, ands, or buts. It's not teachers' jobs. It's not our jobs. It's not the district attorney's office jobs. It's the parents' jobs. I know it's a tough pill for some people to swallow, but it is what it is. You have to take responsibility.
Okay, thank you very much. So we've heard, if you see something, say something, all right? And we've also heard from those of us who are parents, grandparents, that we have to be responsible in knowing where our children are at all times, okay? We have to take some type of responsibility ourselves besides the officers. Now, let me ask you this question since we've been hearing about the mass shootings, and it is on one of the questions that you have. What procedure or policy does each agency have in place if there was a mass shooting in this area? Yes, sir. You have the mic.
Yes, we have a policy set in place where if we get called to a mass shooting, it is guaranteed that our officers have to go in. Nobody has to stand by and wait for any other call. If you call us saying that there's a shooting at a school or at a grocery store, we're going in. We got to neutralize the threat to make sure that nobody else gets hurt. We go through formal training. It's called alert training. It's a rapid response training that we go through at least once a year, where each officer goes through, and you can go into these places. If you show up and you're by yourself, you know what to do. If you got other people that are with you, they know what to do. So you go in, one person, 2 people, 4 people, it doesn't matter. They teach you how to go in and neutralize the threats that we have.
Okay, thank you. That was Morgan City and Patterson.
Not just for mass shooting, but any shooting. We have a policy in place. The policy is to move quickly and safely. and secure the scene and protect life. I'm sorry, I'll start over. Not just for mass shooting, but for any shooting, we have a policy in place. The policy is to move quickly and safe and possible to protect life and secure the scene. But just because it's on paper, that don't mean it's gonna happen the way you have it written down. Something could happen. It's always a hiccup that comes up with the situation. But the biggest thing is to protect life and be safe.
Okay, thank you. Move it down.
Mass shootings, I agree with both of these chiefs. What our policy is we do go in and we eliminate the threat. That's the only way we're going to save lives that's left in that building. We eliminate the threat. Once we do so, we maintain control of that building. We help the victims, the wounded, whatever the case may be. That's what we're going to do. But the first thing we do is eliminate that threat.
I'm going to echo the same things that the chiefs and chief deputy said. We're gonna terminate the threat. We've been trained to terminate the threat. All of our officers go over that same scenario, and then we're gonna do what we can to help the wounded, call emergency aid. But our main concern is to make sure that that person doesn't hurt anyone else. Now that scenario can change depending on what may happen, hostage situation and stuff like that. But the main focus of our department, our officers are trained on, is terminating the threat and then rendering aid to those that may be hurt or wounded.
Over in Baldwin, we have a policy in place. For the mass shooting, I would have to call the sheriff department in. By my agency so small, I would have to rely on the sheriff department to come in and assist with one of the schools that I have. But I do have a policy in place, and I would call on the sheriff department to assist Baldwin.
Okay, and how many officers currently do you have employed? You say you have a small staff.
Yeah, right now I have full-time officers, including myself.
Okay, cool. And Pastor Mike, Chief Beverly, how many officers do you have?
We have 21 officers with the Franklin Police Department. 3 of those are detectives, and they work in the narcotics portion of the department. In addition to that, we have, of those 21 people, 4 are dispatchers, and then we have an animal warden that assists us with many problems that we have with the animals and everything. But we have at least 15 officers that actually do the patrol for the most part.
We have 139 deputies employed. Some are civil, patrol, narcotics, detectives, jail staff, and as always, we're always looking for a few good people. So at the end of this, I'll be having applications. We always look for good people, and I can see some good people out there.
We have 24 officers employed by the Patterson Police Department.
We have 50, which would include all the patrol, detectives, narcotics, corrections, and along with our front office staff and dispatch.
We have 14, and we handle everything from homicides to picking up trash on the side of the road. So we have dedicated officers for patrol and for dispatch and animal warden. But we multitask at my department, and we get the job done.
Okay, thank you very much. Just a show of hands. How many of your officers work, you have officers that are employed. Some work day, some work night. How many of your officers, of those that you said, show of hands, how many work half? You have half of them work in the daytime and half of your officers work at night. Show of hands. Okay, show of hands. How many, most of them work at night? Because that's when most of the things occur. Okay, thank you very much. All right. Let me ask this question also. As far as we're talking about mass shootings and all, but let's talk about the schools. In St. Mary Parish, how many officers, or are there any officers all right, or SROs, which are school resource officers, in any of the schools in St. Mary Parish?
As far as the SROs, the Sheriff's Department, I think, has 2 certified SROs. But I'm proud to say that former Chief Richard, who's sitting in the audience and council member, many years ago, we began putting officers into the schools, random checks, walkthroughs, engaging students, engaging teachers, walking around, just a show of presence. That was at the very beginning of the mass shootings in the school systems. But we were there, and I strongly feel that we were a leader in that aspect of having officers in schools. To this day, randomly, we have, during the day, week, we have more population in our school system than we do probably in the town itself. So it is a very high priority. And it was recognized by former Chief Richard. And I continued this, and I'm sure it will continue.
Okay.
Our officers are in and out of all 3 of the schools all day long.
Okay, thank you. That's in Berg. What about in Morgan City? Do we have police officers in place in the Morgan City schools?
Yes, ma'am. We have 2 SROs, which they also teach the DARE program for the school system. But we have each and every officer that's working day shift while school is in. It's designated they have to do walkthroughs through the schools.
Okay.
That way they're seen, they can talk to them, talk to the principals if any problems. And you would be surprised at some of the information some of our officers get just by talking to the students themselves.
I wouldn't be surprised. Okay, thank you. In Patterson, do we have?
In Patterson, we have 1 officer that does both the schools, the Patterson Junior High School and Eddie Watts. But the officers stop in and go speak with the kids and do walk-arounds also.
Okay, good. What about Franklin? Oh, you want go on? The Sheriff Department.
We have 2 SROs that go from school to school. We also have a DARE officer that does the same. We also hold many classes in these schools. Anything that they ask us to teach, we'll have our officers go there to teach about bullying and whatever else. We also have our deputies walk through the schools during the day.
Okay, thank you.
Once again, we also have a DARE officer that goes to the schools. In addition to that, we do the walkthroughs also, and we work closely with the sheriff office SROs. They call on us continuously to help them, and then we actually do K9 work with the sheriff office. They put their K9s together with our K9s, and we walk through the school and look for drugs and everything. So we work together hand in hand to make sure that those kids that's in the schools see a face of an officer. In addition to that, the teacher can feel secure that we have officers that may show up at any time. So that's one of our big goals, is to make sure that they know any time of the day, from the morning to the afternoon, that an officer may walk through that school.
I have Raintree Elementary in the Baldwin town limits. I have my day officer, he goes and check on the kids in and out randomly. I also have the St. Mary Parish Sheriff Department come in to assist Baldwin over at checking on the kids at the school.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me ask the DA, what programs do your office have in place to provide help to parents with unruly juveniles?
Well, we have many. We have a whole service, a family services division. We employ 125 people. Now, of course, we're over 3 parishes. My jurisdiction is St. Mary, Iberia, and St. Martin Parish, so I go north of I-10 by Arnoldville all the way to Amelia. We have 3 separate offices, 25 assistant DAs. But what we found out over the years is it's a lot easier to correct the behavioral problems at a much earlier age than, say, 16, 15, 17-year-olds. And if anybody's been in the education system, they're probably familiar with our early intervention program with family services. What we do is we work in conjunction with the teachers in the school system, and let's say a teacher, anybody who's a teacher, we have any teachers in here? Okay. Well, you know when there's going to have a problem with one of your students, right? And it kind of started years and years ago in the early 2000s, where the teacher is able to identify a problem, and we do it as early as in elementary school. And you have a child that's hungry, they're falling asleep, they're disheveled, you know there's a problem at home. And so when the school system is unable to solve the problem, they reach out to us. And then, believe it or not, sometimes when the letter comes from the DA's office, it has a little bit more attention getting. And we're able to go in there at that point and assess the situation, and we may find that you might have a parent who has either a mental health issue or drug issues, and we're able to get some help to that parent. We're able to get the kids in some feeding programs, after school programs, and try to deal with their needs, and it really helps turn them around. So we're very involved. Over half my staff is involved in this kind of trying to deal and correct the problems at an early age. We do it also with the JASC program, which is taking juveniles, like when they're arrested for some crime, and maybe it's a theft or a burglary. We get the report from the law enforcement agencies, and these gentlemen's agencies are great in getting it to us within, I think, 48 or 72 hours. It gets to us, we get a game plan together, we reach out to the parent and said, come in, and we make sure they understand it's voluntary. So look, we got a game plan right here. These are the needs and these are the services we can offer you to help curb your child's behavior, and that way we can prevent them from getting involved in the criminal justice systems, and they can go on and be successful in life. And we do that very, very often through our juvenile departments in all 3 parishes. And I'm proud to say, out of all those students who go through that Family in Need of Services, FINS, and these kind of programs, roughly 10% at best, end up in court. So we have 90% success rate in avoiding court, which I think is in the best interest of the child when you're not talking about very serious violent or sex offenses that are being committed.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh, yes.
Being in Morgan City, we have a special system because we are able to deal with juveniles in our own town. Went back and we did some research. We had 175 juveniles that were arrested last year. Most of them dealing with fighting. A lot of them started dealing with the drugs, the weapons. But I can tell you, Judge Stansbury stays on top of it. Judge Stansbury gets these kids in some type of program. Either it's on probation, where they have to go and pick up trash on the side of the road. They have to commit to doing better in school. He has a after-school program that's set up for any kid in the school system that wants to go and hang out. There's a place for them to go. Teaches them how to cook, teaches them how to sew, teaches them how to do anything that you could think about in the public's eye. They have people that go in and mentor to them, where if they have any questions, then they could do that. But I can guarantee you, we are very special when it comes to juveniles, because we'll be able to handle that in-house. Judge Stansbury does it very quickly. Ms. Sandy Nolan stays on top of her probation, and then the people at the after-school program sure help us out a lot.
Can I just say something real quick? To put it all in perspective, in our 3 parishes in our office, similar to what was just discussed, we implemented 771 service plans, addressing 771 children. So it's a need out there, and a support system that's drastically needed.
We recently at the Sheriff's Office know that putting kids in jail or arresting them, they're not always the right answer. Some of these kids need help, they need mentorship, and recently we just received a $150,000 grant to mentor children, the kids in school. We also, Oscar West is a preacher for us. He is one of the gentlemen that's going to be heading this up. He's going to be teaching advocates on how to deal with these juveniles, helping these kids that have mental or anger issues. We'll be starting that up soon, helping the parents, because we need to save these kids. Jail is not always the right answer. We also have recently reached out to the school board where we have Conversations for Life, where we have inmates at our jail that are willing to speak to juveniles at school. We'd like to set up Zoom meetings where they could sit down and speak to the inmates, and inmates speak to the students in a safe area where there's no contact, but for the inmate to describe what jail life is and tell them what reality is. And hopefully it will guide these children to make the right decisions. And we do have some inmates that's willing to cooperate and help with these programs.
Well, us at Franklin Police Department also take it seriously about trying to help these young kids. Approximately a week ago, Mayor Foucault brought a young man to the Franklin Police Department that had some issues. Mayor Foucault's wife had brought the young man to his office. He had never ever even had an opportunity to see a mayor before. So he was excited to see Mayor Foucault, and then Mayor Foucault actually brought him to the Franklin Police Department, where I spoke to him for a few minutes, showed him the jail, got him an opportunity to see what a jail looked like, and what could happen if a person does not find himself down the correct path. So we both mentored that young man that day. He was very happy to get a chance to see a police department and a policeman. And it's those type of things that put a lasting memory on those young men. In addition, today we had to arrest a young juvenile, and one of the things that his grandmother, who had taken him from his mom and dad because they didn't care for him at all, he got arrested for hitting a young lady with a stick, and I actually brought him in, spoke to him for a few minutes. He talked about how he was treated because he was obese and that no one cared for him. He didn't think his mother or his dad cared for him. And his grandmother also backed that statement up. And I made a promise to him today that myself and some of the police officers were going to check on him. And we was going to make sure that he got properly dressed. And that's one of the things that we promised each other at the Franklin Police Department, that we're going to take from our salary, the money that we have, the little money that we make, and pass that on to these young kids to make them feel more in tune with their community and assist them any way we can. And I was glad that all the police officers that were there today spoke to him and made sure he felt as though he meant something. And that's something that we should do as a community.
Okay.
Most of my juveniles in Baldwin, they respect me. I get in the community and I work with the juveniles. Probably around 7, 8 years ago, I was doing an Angola trip to take them on a charter bus, but funds started getting low with people not being able to give donations. But most of my kids in the community, they respect me. I get out and I talk with the juveniles. If I does get one come to the office, it's for one that's not wanting to go to school, and I sit them down and I speak to them and talk to them, and then they go off to school with the parents. But most of the juveniles in Baldwin, they are pretty respectable and are always willing to work with the juveniles.
Thank you very much. We're kind of running out of time because we want the members of the audience to be able to ask questions too. And so we had more people this time than the last time, and I don't know if you talk longer than the mayors or not, but we want to move on. Just by a show of hands, do any of you participate in a gun buyback or drug drop-off program? Okay, one. Could you just briefly
We participate in a drug take-back. We used to do it for many years with the DA in different places, but we also have a box at our branch office in Morgan City. Looks like a big mailbox. Anybody that wants to come in can come in, drop off drugs of any type, no questions asked, drop it off and leave.
Okay, thank you. And this is going to be the last question before we can turn it over to the audience. What policy does your agency have in place for citizens wishing to get involved in the see something, say something, but want to remain anonymous?
At the sheriff's office, we invite this. We need all the help we can get when it comes to serving the people of St. Mary Parish. Without the help of the citizens, we won't be able to do anything. So we do have tip hotlines on our website where you can leave tips, or on Facebook, or give us a call. You do not have to give your name, just the information, and we'll be more than happy to receive that.
Once again, at the Franklin Police Department, our policy is clear. Anyone can call in and remain anonymous and give us any information. We're very serious about protecting their anonymity. And once again, that has come from Mayor Polkart, the bond that we have on working together to make sure that the citizens feel comfortable calling any one of the police officers and making sure that they give a tip and that they don't have to worry about their name or any information about them or given to anyone. So we are real serious about that. That's something that we highly speak of all the time, and we're going to continue to harp on that policy of you can remain anonymous when you give a tip to our department.
Okay, thank you very much. So it is very important that if you see something, say something, and what I'm hearing is going to be anonymous. Thank you, gentlemen, very much. You're not through yet because some people in the audience have some questions for you, but thank you so much for the answers that you gave, that you were asked. I would like to also say that I did work for the Family Service Division, and I just want to put a plug in. It's an excellent program that I work with in the school system. Okay, who's handling the questions for the audience? Okay, is there a question? Okay. Give us your name and then ask the question, please.
Quick question, I can talk loud. My question is about repeat offenders for juveniles, especially violent crimes. Mr. Dewey, you mentioned something about 17-year-olds. What is the law as far as repeat offenders go when it comes to a juvenile?
The juvenile, that's been a topic.
Can you all hear?
Where's the mic?
Okay, pass the mic, please.
That's a good question. There actually was a bill this year, because, for the most part, all juvenile proceedings are confidential. The theory behind it was, juveniles are young, they make mistakes, you don't want to saddle them with a criminal record. When they become adults, that record is generally sealed. But there was actually a bill in the legislature this year that I think was targeted at juvenile, particularly the amount of juveniles we have with weapons, trying to use a previous adjudication as a juvenile where they had committed a crime of violence with a gun as a juvenile, that when they became an adult and they committed another crime with a weapon, that you can use the prior crime in that adult proceeding, which is the first time that really has come up about using a previous juvenile adjudication for an adult conviction. So unfortunately, it failed this year. So we don't really have anything with respect to a juvenile once they become an adult. Now, as juvenile offenders in this earlier ages repeat their crimes, is generally, the judges know that, is we run into the same problem. If it's not a violent crime, they're not going to be adjudicated and sent to a facility for the most part.
The main concern is about violent crime.
Yeah.
If a kid is 15 years old, has
Absolutely.
a violent crime, and at 16 he does the same thing, and at 17 he does the same
Absolutely.
thing, and he's not going to jail. It's not the arrest part, it's what we do with that person, because evidently that person
Right.
doesn't want to be fixed.
And that's what this statute or this legislation was designed, I think, to address. Unfortunately, it didn't pass this year. It was killed in a committee or never got put onto the floor. So it's obviously coming up, particularly now with all the juvenile gun violence. So I think you're going to see a bigger push moving in that direction, which I agree with. But just right now, there's nothing that, like if an adult, you have what's called the Habitual Offender Law, where if someone commits multiple crimes over a period of time, that you can enhance the penalty if the judge decides to do that.
Address that issue, I don't know who will ever solve that problem. In my
Right,
opinion.
right.
I mean, we can arrest them all we want, but,
Right.
The old 3 strikes and you're out kind of deal, if a kid wants, evidently he's being used by an adult because he knows that adult's not going to jail, and he continues to do the same thing.
Right. And I agree with you. I think that.
Save everybody, but we can't.
Right. And I agree with you. I think that was one of the legislators' goal, is to deal with that. And particularly, I think it was directed more to Orleans Parish, because there were, and it happens in every parish in the state, that these juveniles are getting armed with more powerful weapons, better weapons, and they're using them to commit these crimes, and that needs to be addressed. You need to address the infrastructure of where to put them, because we would love to, when they commit the first crime, that's a violent crime, maybe put him in a center where he can be detained and get some resources, but that infrastructure doesn't exist, unfortunately. It should, but it doesn't.
Being with our juvenile system, Judge Stansbury will take, and once the violent offender is adjudicated, he'll take and send them off with OJJ, have them locked up till, 21 years old? But what happens after that? We're gonna have to deal with them all over again until they get something in the juvenile system that's gonna try to get these kids back to where they should be. We're gonna have issues all over again.
Unfortunately, right now, whenever they're sent off, like Chief Griffin said, they get a better education of how to be a criminal instead of constructive things to get them onto the right path. We need to have something put in place that is constructive for these children to do. Instead of just locking them up and throwing them away and them becoming a better criminal whenever they get out at 21 years old, something has to be done constructively to teach them to change their ways, to be a productive person in society, period.
Next question.
Hello, my name is Sabrina Austin, and I'm a 34-year veteran and counting. And in the military, I am a military police. I instruct new soldiers coming in the military to be military policing. So training is important, and I understand that. And Chief Garrett Grogan said something that touched me, and I want to ask all the chiefs, with the school shootings, because I train military police, training is important. Have we stepped up our training for these school shootings, and do we have the equipment able to handle these school shootings? Because when we see these school shootings, we see high-powered weapons. Are we equipped and trained better because we're having this? Are we stepping up training for this? Because we live in a small parish, and we think it's not going to happen here, but we asking, are we stepping up training for that?
Yes,
Yes, we are stepping up our training. Also, we recently getting all our patrol units will have AR-15s where we're training with them to have the same powered rifle that we're dealing with the people out in the public. So we're also doing training in the schools also.
In Berwick also, we have equipped all of our patrol officers with, like what Chief Grogan had indicated, firepower to meet or exceed what we're seeing out on the streets. Unfortunately, in Berwick, we were equipped all of our officers with trauma plates that will defeat some of these calibers that we're seeing out on the streets. All of our officers is just another tool in the toolbox that there should be no hesitation, and there will be no hesitation if something goes wrong. We're equipped, and we train with them, and we train with the other departments. And that's paramount to us, is to go in and have the proper equipment and to do the job effectively to save lives.
Again, we train regularly. In Morgan City, we have 8 schools that we have to patrol. So that's 8 different areas that we have to be concerned about each and every day that schools is in session. But I guarantee you that each of the officers that are out there, everyone strives to make sure that they're in the schools, that they're listening, and if anything should happen, we do have the firepower that we need.
Yes, we train every year on active shooter. We spoke earlier where Alert just came in and taught classes to numerous agencies here in the parish on active shooter. They also made several instructors in this class for every department that attended. We do have patrol rifles, shotguns, entry tools given to our deputies so that we can make entry and do what we have to do on anything like this. Usually at least once a year, we also get with other agencies, fire departments, Acadian Ambulance, and some hospitals to do a mock active shooter drill so that we can be prepared for anything.
Just quickly, I'm gonna just go echo what everybody else said up here. We do active shooter drills, and I'm gonna give a shout out to Pastor Chad Hebert. He lets us use his church at First Baptist Church in Franklin, and most of the agencies have also assisted us with that active shooter drill, and we even had the mayor come in and speak to them right after that. So that's very important, that training to us, and we train constantly.
Right now, I have in place some online classes for my officers with active shooting, and also the sheriff department also invites Baldwin to come to their classes also on that active shooting.
Next question.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Tammy Moore, and my question is, does the parish or the local communities have a strategic plan to address crimes, violence, and threats of violence? And if so, how we as citizens can participate? I have a second part to that. We've referenced the Morgan City Youth Program that's housed at the SLCC campus here in Morgan City, and we know the success rate of it. Why do we not have a plan to model that same program in other parts of the parish? Specifically, I live on the west end of the parish, so I would love for us to be able to have some funding to implement something similar in the west end of the parish.
That's correct. It is a wonderful program that they have. I would ask any and everybody that's in here to go by there and check it out. They're always looking for mentors. They want people to go in and talk to the kids, but again, it's a wonderful, wonderful program.
In Berwick, our town council has strove to make a significant impact in the youth programs when it comes to whether it be youth basketball, youth softball. We cater to the youth. We encourage neighboring communities. We are really huge on youth programs and getting them off of the street and doing them something constructive. And our plan for keeping our community safe is to be proactive and to get citizens to see something, say something. And in Berwick, going back to a previous question, you have the ability to contact the police department and be anonymous. If you see something happening, you can contact the police department via the Town of Berwick's website anonymously through a message, through an email, or you can call the department. As far as I can remember, for the last 35 years, we have not pressed anyone to identify themselves if they want to give us significant information that will solve a crime.
And also to bring up, last week, Wednesday, I get a call to go sit with some people in the community that wanted to sit down with the police department and have a meeting. Excuse me. We go back and we talk to them. They're talking about different areas of their neighborhood that they're having problems with, as far as drugs being sold, people using drugs, people riding around in the area looking for certain things, having issues with street lights being out. Well, all it took was for us to go back there and listen to them, give them the information that they needed, and for them to know what we could do for them. All they got to do is call. All you got to do is call. You don't have to leave a name. You don't have to leave a number. You don't have to do anything. All you have to do is get involved and call.
Thank you very much. We're ready for our next question.
Yes, ma'am. Before I ask my question, I'd like to give kudos to the Sheriff's Department. My former school, JS Oakland, we created a rapid response team, coordinated with the Sheriff's Department, came up with a plan, and then we did the active shooter training, and I recommend that highly in all of our schools, because you can have a plan, but until you start hearing those pops go off in the hall and the commotions and everything else, it doesn't get real. It doesn't get more real than that, with the exception of course, the unfortunate incident. My question's two parts to Chief Leonard and to Mr. Driscoll. I heard a good idea from an officer. He said that when he has to do paperwork, he finds a local school and he pulls into the parking lot and he does his paperwork in the parking lot. My question is, for these next couple of things, is it mandatory and or can you make it mandatory? Is it mandatory or can you make it mandatory that police officers, that when they have to do their paperwork, just pull up at a local school's parking lot and start doing their paperwork? Can you have more walkthroughs at schools? And I'm glad to hear that Chief Leonard brought up that Berwick was doing that. Can we do more of that? Can you make a certain amount of their patrol to be spent at a school? And my second part question is, what ideas do you have for our school system, then how could we improve the security at the school system?
It's not mandated for our officers to go to any particular spot, so if they want to go sit at a school, we encourage to do that. Obviously, just the visual impact of a police unit sitting in front of the school or a bank or any other type of business would ward off the regular person that wants to cause trouble. When it comes to the security of the school, I think we need more cooperation out of the school board. There are certain things that we need access to in law enforcement that we're denied, and I think that if some of those doors would be open, and it would be more helpful for the police department. I think that the teachers should be encouraged to forward their information, their input into the police department. I know they have a chain of command, and I respect that 100%, but they should also be allowed to share their concerns with the police department, with the chief, to let us know what's going on, or to our town council, 100%. For security, our town in Berwick is relatively small. Our teachers, they know who belongs on campus and who doesn't belong on campus. They're very vigilant. They're vigilant when it comes to a student that is troubled, that a parent that has issues. We are constantly in the schools. We have a very good relationship with the school board. I just wish that they would allow certain other security issues to be allowed to make our job more effective if something tragic would happen at any one of the 3 schools.
And one of the town hall meetings, is my understanding, the school board will have representatives here, and we'll be able to bring these questions again as far as the school board is concerned.
We welcome them.
Hi, I'm Alderman Margaret Coleman from the town of Baldwin, and I just want to commend my chief of police, Harry Smith. We have a small force, but he is doing his best with it. I can tell you, our town never be uncovered. So do we feel safe in the town of Baldwin? Yes. Do we have problems in the town of Baldwin? Yes. But I do feel our town is being handled with the force that we do have and with the help of the sheriff department. A question is to be asked, but I don't think neither one of y'all can answer that, is how do you make them say something when they see something? I don't think either one of y'all can answer, because this is the problem that we are having in the town of Baldwin. They are doing things, but when our policemen go out to make arrests, no one sees anything. And then if they try to handle the situation, then you have to fight the families. So how do you handle that type of problem? You know, we put it on the police department that you all need to be in control of this, but if the residents choose not to say something, parents, families, how could you handle this when they choose not to say something?
That's a problem. It's been a problem for a long time. I was the mayor of Franklin for 22 years. We had an officer that everyone in the community trusted, and people went to him, and he took care of just about everything. And it's a requirement, I think, in each department to elevate someone like that, someone that they just can trust and know that what I'm going to tell you is not going to be spread out all over the place. It takes hard work. And while I'm here, I want to say this to the police officers. I'm a member of Governor Edwards' staff, and he put a $500 proposal out for the supplemental pay for this year. When it got to the legislature, they said, well, we need to cut it to $300. When they got finished, they cut it to $100. I would think that most anybody here tonight would not work for what those police officers are doing. It's a hard, tough job, and it's a thankless job, but I appreciate you. We all appreciate you and your efforts that you do. One thing that you can do, for 12 years, I was a baseball coach in the summertime. Probably coached 100 kids. I can tell you, not a single one of them's in jail. Not a single one of them ever got arrested. They were black, white, young, old. Still call me today. I see one sitting there now. Bum folk. We talk about the old days, but the mentorship is important. Sometimes you're the only mentor that a kid gets, if you're a coach or if you're a member of an organization. There were kids that come back to me over the years and said, you know, I was on the way down the wrong path, and you talked me out of it, and I didn't even know it. But they listen. Pieces of what you say falls into their ears and into their hearts, and they go in a better direction. So I want to thank you for inviting me here tonight, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you for being concerned about the community, and thank you guys.
You have another question?
Good afternoon. My name is Connie Franklin Byes, and the issue of mental health has not been really addressed here tonight. I know that mental health is out there. I want to know from all the St. Mary Parish. I want to know when an older person have a mental condition and they have some kind of issue and they get arrested. And I would like to know, why is it that the mental patient is not getting the help that they need in the jail system? They may go there for a misdemeanor, but in the process, they stay into that facility over 4, 5, 6 months, and naturally, without medication or anything, that patient is going to act up. So eventually, it becomes a felony. So, could you answer this question for me? Why is it the mental health issue is not addressed in the St. Mary Parish jail as it should be? Thank you.
Is that a question that we're going to answer at another town hall meeting in mental health?
Yes, we will have mental health at the next town hall meeting.
Okay. Is there another question? Ma'am, we're going to answer that another, and please come back. Thank you.
Hey, it's Lee Dragon. So, everybody up there has said that the kids, let's just watch everybody turn around, that the kids are a lot of the problem. And what I noticed in Morgan City is we have a lot of, well, I'm not going to say kids, young adults that are our policemen now, right? So why don't we try to use, and I'm open for suggestions, why don't we try to use those younger officers to try to get on the level of these kids that's in the junior high and the high school? Because times have changed. Look, everybody up there, most of the people in here, just got it beat into them when we were kids, right? We can't do that anymore. So maybe we need to get on the level of them and incentivize them in some type of way to trust those officers. Like I even heard them say, we can't talk about what a juvenile tells us, right? Well, there you go. There's your trust right there. Hey, tell me something, tell an officer something, and he can't tell anybody you told him. You know, so there's something that I'm thinking about of implementing in Morgan City, but just think about it, because if we can get on the level of their thinking, then maybe we can get to them in a different way other than arresting them, putting them in jail. You know, I just, look, there's bad apples everywhere you go. But a lot of these kids just don't have anybody to talk to. They don't have anybody to listen to. And we need to change that. And why not use the young people we got? We paying them already, let's just use them. You know, I mean, if anybody has any comment on that, I'm open to it. But I think by listening to y'all and everybody else here, I think we need to take a little bit different approach and go and get on their level and understand them and let them understand us too. So, I mean, if anybody got any comments, I'm willing to listen to that.
I think it's all about community policing. Getting out there and speaking to people one-on-one as a friend, not as a police officer talking to what they think is a suspect. You gotta earn trust, and it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time to earn the trust of these kids and adults out there, period. You can't just pass by and say hello once or twice. You need to stop, talk to these kids. We encourage our deputies to get out there and play basketball, throw the football with them, do whatever it takes. Talk to them on a one-on-one basis. Become friends with them, because that's when we start gaining all the information. You know, if you can't talk to people in our line of work, you're in trouble, because that's where it all starts. That's where you gather your intel. But you got to learn to be able to trust these people that you're serving, and you got to get them to trust you. And you're absolutely right, Mayor. You got to get on their level.
We have another question.
Yes, my name is Carl Folkard. I'm from Franklin, Louisiana. And I would just like to reiterate what Mayor Dragna just stated. And I played Sheriff League with Sam Jones in American Legion, and it is about relationships. I never wanted to do anything wrong because of the relationship Sam and I had, and I didn't want to disappoint him. But that's because he coached me in American League. But I had a question. There was a young man, juvenile, that got in trouble, I think in Morgan City, and it was maybe like $400 per day to send him to Mississippi. Well, could we have, I know we released him to his parents, but it was if it's a violent crime, and I know the judges normally make older offenders wear ankle monitors, but to keep the public safe, can we start placing ankle monitors on juveniles until they get to court in front of the judges? You know, that's just a thought because, you know, it'll keep that defendant safe and it'll keep the public safe. And I know also when I was a kid, I skipped out of school maybe like 2 or 3 days. And I would like to know if the cities or if the DA office, I know we have like Oscar West, but do we have strictly a truant officer to monitor these juveniles while they out of jail until they go back in front of the judge and get placed on probation? Well, yeah, we need a truant officer. Yeah.
All right, Judge.
Yeah, well, just had a concern about juveniles wearing ankle bracelets, and crime and economics have a direct correlation. So if you hold the parents accountable and make them pay for the ankle monitors if we can't afford to pay $400 a day to send them to a juvenile facility. You know, if it hurt them in the pockets, then maybe they might take more accountability and responsibility for their children.
We're going to take one more question, but as you're bringing the mic to the lady, I would just like to say, as we are coming together, because that's what this is all about, coming together, hearing that questions, coming up with your answers, and coming together with a solution for it. And so Mr. Fulcord suggested about ankle braces. And so as you are coming together and talking about things that we could do, put that on the table to see what you can do. He also talked about truant officers. I know years and years ago, we did have truant officers as far as the St. Mary Parish School Board was concerned, of the Sheriff's Department. I'm not too sure who it was, but they would ride around and stop children who were of younger age. So put that on the table to discuss as something that we can do to come together to combat juvenile problems.
Ms. Pearl, we just had a judge that commented on the ankle bracelets. He said the families have to pay for them. So if the families can't afford to pay for the ankle bracelets.
Okay, we're saying is that the families had to pay for the ankle bracelet, and if the family can't pay for it, or say they can't pay for it, then what we're going to do. Okay.
We actually just looked into, and we discussed with the mayor purchasing 4 ankle bracelets. The city was going to purchase those ankle bracelets just because we have some offenders. And I know each of the chiefs could say the same thing, that we have some young men and some young women that everybody recognize as doing the crimes across the board. And so one of the things that we can kind of monitor them and keep an eye on them is through ankle bracelets. So we were discussing that shortly ago just to make sure that that's one of the tools that we have in our toolbox.
Okay, well, we're going to put that on the table for discussion. We'll take this question.
Okay, quickly. We do know that many times children live their environment. We don't want to say it tonight, but that is where a lot of it is coming from. So what they need a lot of times, as Mayor Dragner was talking about, is they need some good mentors. Mentors, community people, community men and women in the community, because sometimes a home, it is what it is. So these children need to know that there are options, that they have other options than quickly pointing a gun in somebody's head and shooting them, that they don't need to rob in order to make money, that they can learn that maybe if they're having low grades in school and maybe they're not doing very well in school, that they have options such as Miss Tammy over here at South Louisiana Community College, where we have a wonderful program, a high set program that can help them to achieve their high school diploma. Because a lot of times what happens with these children is that they feel locked in, they feel have no other options. So they need to know that there are options.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
This is for Chief Grogan. I would like to know why we don't have neighborhood watches anymore. Like, we used to have signs on our streets and stuff, and everybody could tell somebody what's going on. But people don't want to tell. I mean, it's like if they had that would be a different thing with this saying
But that's
about different
understandable.
things.
Definitely understandable. What the situation is with everything else is that to see something, say something, people are afraid of the retaliation thing now. A lot of people see things, but are afraid to tell you because they're afraid of the retaliation. So that's what we're trying to come together now, that people can trust the police department. Because myself, I don't go to work every day to see how many people that I can arrest. I go there to see how many people I can help along that day. That's what I do. It's not about putting people in jail, it's about helping them along the way. And once you get them comfortable with you, then you'll have that relationship where they don't have a problem with calling you, telling you something, and explaining to you what happened or what they saw. Okay?
All right, thank you all so much. They have done a fantastic job. And we just want to thank you. You have a lot on the table, a lot to go back, to think about. And I heard you say you have a task force, a lot of things going to come up. How do you get volunteers? You know they're asking for volunteers. And what we said first, what I said, look in the mirror. Think about what can you do to help. We're telling them what they need to do, how they need to get together, but what can you do? If you see something, you have to say something. My name is Pearl Rack. Good evening.
All right, thank you all so very much. Next week we will have all of the social service agencies, and we will have mental health, we will have the school board, we will have all the different other providers out there on next Monday night. Thank you so very much.